and my phone cut off and I lost the GPS tracking. But I had screen prints of everything that was going on with the map, the address, everything else. And the Samsung people had the same information. Woman in the house had no idea that Samsung was involved and led me there. They just thought, I guess I was some guy that tried to help find his phone and trace it to your house. So we sat in the car, Michael and Cullen and I. And Michael then got out and continued to use the flashlight to look all around in the trash can, all around our house, under the porch and stuff. And I put my phone on the charger and I got it up to about 4% in the next 8 minutes. And then I called Samsung back and got Claire on the phone. And she had tried to call me, but my battery was dead. She couldn't reach me. And then we got back onto the GPS tracking, and the phone had moved out of the house about 200 yards back onto where the middle of the bridge was. And I said, what? How could the phone move? And she said, the phone's been taken from where it was because the GPS shows that it's a couple hundred feet further back over on the bridge. And the GPS showed the bridge. I mean, the graphics are wonderful. So I was like, wow. And then Michael said, I saw somebody walking over the bridge. And then he goes, but I don't know if it's somebody in the house. Well, then we turned the car around and we saw that there was another door on the other side of the house. And so after the lady told me she didn't know anything about the phone, 8 minutes later, my phone has now traveled from the inside of her house to the bridge. Now, ma'am, if you're listening to this story and you haven't been questioned by the police yet or whatever, I don't have any intention to press charges. That's up to the police, not me. But the bottom line to it is that I want you to know that I just want some lessons to be learned of all the people that may be involved in this saga. Okay, so the GPS lady said the phone is on the bridge, but it's lost the signal. It appears that it's thrown in the water. And we're like, me and Mike, like, oh, I can't believe it. Are you kidding me? Come on now. Why didn't they? I was telling Michael that I was going to go back before we knew this and knock on the door and say, hey, I want to let you know that I'll give a $50 reward if when I come back tomorrow, you have the phone. I figured, okay, maybe they'll realize, hey, we'll find the phone, let him know we've got it, he'll give us money. Because, you're not going to get the phone back maybe unless you get some money on the table. So that's where I go with this. And but I didn't get a chance to offer the reward because the phone, I was shocked that it had been moved from the house to the bridge because I was going to go back and offer a reward. I knew I needed to do that. Well, now the GPS tracking lady at Samsung, Claire, she said, it looks like the phone's in the water and it can't be tracked anymore. So it's like, all right. So I took Michael and Cullen back home. My wife was in a complete panic that we're out doing all this in the first place. She wasn't comfortable with where we were. So I sat in the garage and I called the police 911. So this story goes on and on. I mean, I had a phenomenal conversation with the dispatcher at the 911. I'm not going to use any real names here, but so I call up and she asked me what I want to do. And she said, we don't use GPS tracking here. Norfolk, city of Norfolk, Virginia doesn't use it. And I said, here's what I would like. I know my phone was there. I would like to have a police officer go with me back to that house so I can ask a few questions about what they know. And it's kind of obvious for all of you that have half a brain, they're not going to admit to anything. The phone's gone. There's no way I can prove anything. I was just hoping that maybe they would just say something. I mean, I didn't really expect it, I guess, at that level if the phone appears to be in the water. And so she said, but if you want to file a report, an officer will meet you and go to that house. And I said, well, I think I do. And so, just to get the right thing here. And what's the lesson that we're supposed to learn here? I mean, they had my phone. If you're listening and you're the lady in this house, I gave my card out to several people today that you'll know at the end of the story how everybody might be listening. Look, I just want to tell you it's all right. Bad decisions are made all day long. Let's make right decisions. Let's train our kids to make right decisions. So what I do next is I call dispatcher back after I thought about it. And I said, if I do this tomorrow, is it the same thing? She goes, yeah, it's the same thing. There's no need to do it tonight. So I thought about it a whole lot. I woke up in the middle of the night and I started praying and meditating. And I ended up finding an article when I Googled scripture for lost property. And let me tell you, I don't know if all of y'all that are listening follow my whole story, but I'm an old guy, 68, and I love the word of the Lord, love Jesus. I used to be like a youth rabbi. I say like, it wasn't an ordained thing, but I was a teacher for 12 years at a temple, and I taught Bible and Torah, and I'm very familiar with the Talmud, the Jewish law. And so I Googled, and I found this amazing article on the return of lost property according to Jewish and common law, a comparison. And it's by two rabbis, Michael J. Brody and Michael Heck. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm reading for about an hour what I'm going to give you the next couple minutes here. But the bottom line to this is that there's tremendous amounts of scripture, Old Testament, Talmudic law, Bible interpretations about what you're supposed to do with lost property. And it goes on and on and on and does a fine line with, is it lost or is it abandoned? And what's the obligation of the person that might find it? And if you find it and it's identified and you can try to track down who it belongs to, should you, what is right? And so, it kind of goes on like that. And in New York, there's some law here that's referenced. Property is not lost when the owner does not know, property is lost when the owner doesn't know where it is. So we're dealing with, I got some lost property, but now I know where it is, so the law might change a little bit. And so this Jewish law continues, and then it talks about what's the obligation of a finder. And now it basically says that the Jewish law goes way, way deeper than just basic common law that most of our laws and our jurisdictions are based on. It goes more into the moral thing that a person should do to really do right. And I want to read a paragraph or two here because it's really interesting to me. Thus, according to the common law, one can walk away from lost property and not be involved. If you don't want to be involved, just ignore it. Like, hey, I don't want to get involved. And then you're not part of it. However, if one is involved, one must follow the rules. That's common law. If you really are involved, you can't walk away. By contrast, Jewish law, a system which imposes duties even in the absence of special relationships, requires that one who sees lost property must involve himself in that property and assist in its return. The origin of this lost property doctrine is in the Bible. 3 verses in the Bible provide the basis for the obligation to involve oneself in the lost property of another. It doesn't quote the Bible verse here. I guess it might be in the footnote here. I could find it if I keep looking. Deuteronomy, I guess it is, 22, 1 through 3. 1, when you see your brother's ox or sheep going astray, do not ignore them. You must return them to him. 2, but if your brother does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you should bring it home, to your house, and it shall remain with you until your brother claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. I knocked on the door. I knew it was there. She told me she didn't know anything. 3, you should do the same with his donkey. You should do the same with his garment. So you should do with anything that your brother loses and you find. You have no right to withdraw from returning it. That's the real highest level of the moral code here of what we should do. Jewish law accepts, based on these verses, that there is a legal imperative to intervene and return the lost property of another. Furthermore, this is in harmony with Jewish law generally, which imposes a duty upon all members of the community to intervene to aid another member of the community. Well, I'm going to hang on that just for a second. Isn't that beautiful? That's what we're all really trying to do, is be responsible citizens, members of community. The basic 3 points of right thinking foundation that says this is what we all need to succeed in life. You need a place to live, 1. 2, you need a job, a means of support income so you can feed and eat and clothe and so forth. And 3, you need to be part of community. That's what right thinking is all about. So a follow-up to last week's show to know more about right thinking. So that's where we get into the Jewish law of what is the requirements are. And so to continue along here, here's another interesting paragraph here that I'd like to say. Well, it just says that Jewish law is pretty strict about this. Let me glean this real quick to see if I marked another section of this. It's a lengthy article, about 15 pages. Here's a paragraph. According to both Jewish law and common law, the finder of lost property is not entitled to a reward unless one is explicitly offered. Well, I was going to offer a reward. I was getting ready to go back to do that. And later in the story, you're going to hear more about the concept of a reward. Well, so that's kind of like going to some pretty good scripture and what we're supposed to do, right from wrong. So I'm going to leave it at that on that part of the saga here. Okay, so in the morning I wake up and my wife and I go to church. And when we get out of church on the way home, I call the Samsung technical people for tracking lost devices because I want to see if maybe there is a signal because I have to file the insurance claim. It's not about the money here. I've got insurance on the phone. There's a deductible. That's okay. But my wife's got a lot of stuff on the phone. Most important thing is she's got a lot of pictures that she gets from people all the time. You know, it's personal stuff. You know, there's a violation here. It's her fault. She left it on my car. She feels terrible about it. But now that we know that the phone has been found and someone's got it and they're not telling us the truth, you know, we're kind of interested. We feel terrible that the phone might have been thrown in the water. And my wife said it too. Why couldn't they just, you know, open the door and say, oh, hey, I didn't know, but, you know, my son found your phone. Here's your phone. And we would have been glad. I would have been glad to give them the reward that I was going to offer. But that's not what happened. You know, it wasn't stolen. It was found. Okay, so remember, the name of the show is, you know, Lost and Found, right from wrong. Okay, so anyway, here we go. I get connected to the device finder again, and the phone shows up in another part of town, 8 miles away. And I'm like, what? The phone is showing up? It's able to track it again? And so that was very serious. So I dropped my wife off and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to go to the address that the GPS says, and I have the actual address. I'm not going to say it, but I had the address. This time I went right into the phone, got the address where the device was being held. And she said, you're going to call the police, aren't you? And I said, yeah. So I called the police. I told them that I talked to the dispatcher last night. And by the way, before I get off of that, the dispatcher last night was a wonderful person. And I told her what I do going into prisons and mentoring people and the hundreds of people that I'm just trying to help them have a better life. And you know, she was very, you know, appreciative of the work that I do. And I said, there's a lesson here, though. There's a lesson is all this is for me. Is I want somebody to know that, you know, they need to do the right thing and that I don't want to punish them, but I want them to know that there's somebody out here. We'll get back to that theme in a minute. So I call up and I tell the dispatcher that I thought it was over. We thought the phone was, you know, thrown into the river, but it wasn't. It's at an address, and I'm requesting, you know, policemen to meet me there. And she said, well, you have to file a police report. Okay, so I went through the whole storyline. I took the 20 minutes to file the police report with the word processor on the phone, the number she gave me. And we got that all done, told the whole story. And then they wanted to know, where do you want to meet him? And so they did not want me to go to the house by myself where the stolen property was. Now it's being called stolen property because it's been found and now moved around when they had a chance to give it back. And so they didn't want me to approach the house by myself. So I was supposed to park right up the end of the block until they got there. And so I followed the GPS and then I parked the car and the police got the address where I was waiting, but it could have been hours before they could dispatch someone. It was, you know, if somebody calls in, they didn't have anybody available. It took about an hour and a half. But while I was staked out about 2 blocks from where the address was, the phone moved from one address to another address, I guess, next door. And it was 10 numbers down. I mean, it might have been on the same block, a couple houses down. Went from 3447 to 3457 on the street. So I was like, whoa. And then I lost the signal, but I was keeping